In 1971, 6 out of every 10 Americans lived in the middle class, and it was the most normal thing in the world. Today, that number has fallen to barely 5 out of 10, and it has been dropping for 50 straight years. That means the single largest group in American life, the group that built the suburbs and the weekends and the whole idea of normal, is quietly disappearing. But here is the part almost nobody talks about, and it changes the entire story. The middle class is not being destroyed. It is being sorted. There is a machine running underneath the American economy. And for 5 decades, it has been picking people up out of the middle and dropping them somewhere else. Some get dropped higher, some get dropped lower, and the middle keeps getting emptier either way. This is the story of that machine, where the missing millions actually went, and why even the people still standing in the middle feel like the floor is moving. Start with what the middle class actually meant, because the phrase has gotten fuzzy over the years. After World War II, America built something that had basically never existed anywhere on Earth before. A single ordinary paycheck, often earned without a college degree, could buy a house, a car, a family vacation, and a pension. The factory worker in Ohio and the accountant in New Jersey lived on the same street and shopped at the same stores. If someone drew the American income distribution back then, it looked like a diamond, thick and heavy in the middle. The middle was not just a bracket on a chart, it was the country's center of gravity. Therefore, politicians campaigned to it, companies built products for it, and every kid was raised to assume they would land in it. But starting in the 1970s, that diamond began to stretch, and it has never stopped stretching since. The Pew Research Center has been tracking this for decades, and their numbers tell the story with brutal clarity. In 1971, 61% of Americans lived in middle-income households. By 2023, that share had shrunk to 51%, a full 10-point collapse in the size of the American middle. 10 percentage points may sound abstract, so put it in human terms. That is roughly 25 million Americans who would be standing in the middle class today if the old shape of the country had simply held. An entire population the size of Texas, sorted out of the middle and relocated somewhere else on the ladder. So the obvious question is the one that decides how scary this story really is. Where do they go, up or down? And the answer is genuinely surprising, because it breaks the story most people expect to hear. More of them went up than went down. The share of Americans in upper-income households nearly doubled, climbing from 11% in 1971 to 19% in 2023. Meanwhile, the share in lower-income households rose too, but by much less, from 27% up to 30%. So for every American who slid down out of the middle, roughly 2 or 3 climbed up and out the top. Therefore, some economists look at this chart and honestly call it good news, a story of national progress. More engineers, more nurses, more two-income professional households out-earning anything their grandparents could have imagined. But if the middle class shrank mostly because people got richer, why does the country feel so squeezed? Why do surveys keep finding that most Americans, including plenty of high earners, say they are living paycheck to paycheck? Because there are 3 catches buried inside that happy chart, and each one is bigger than the last. Catch number 1 is about power, not people. In 1970, middle-class households earned 62% of all the income in America. They were not just the biggest group, they were the economic engine of the entire nation. By the 2020s, the middle-class share of the nation's income had crashed to around 42%. The upper tier, less than a fifth of the population, now takes home roughly half of everything the country earns. Therefore, the middle class did not just get smaller in headcount, it got dramatically weaker as a force. The group that once decided what America bought, watched, and voted for is losing its grip on the wheel. Catch number 2 is about speed. Every income tier is richer today than it was in 1970. And that part is real. But the tiers are not rising together. They are pulling apart, like cars on a highway driving at different speeds. Since 1970, middle-class incomes grew by about 60% after inflation. Sounds decent, until it sits next to the upper tier, which grew nearly 80% over the same stretch. The middle is technically moving forward while falling further behind every single year, and that gap compounds like interest. Falling behind while moving forward is one of the strangest feelings in economics, and millions of families live inside it daily. And catch number 3 is the one that hits closest to home, because it lives in every family's budget. The bracket called middle class survived. but the price of a middle-class life exploded. Think about what the middle-class package actually contains, the things that made the label mean something. A house, health insurance, childcare, a college fund, and a retirement that does not depend on winning the lottery. Almost every item in that package inflated faster than wages for decades on end. Therefore, a family can sit squarely inside the official middle-income bracket and still be unable to afford the middle-class life. This is why a household earning $90,000 in 2026 can feel poorer than their parents did earning $40,000 in 1990. The parents bought the whole package on that paycheck, while the kids are renting half of it and financing the rest. The label survived the last 50 years. The lifestyle is what got deleted. So now the real question, the one this whole story has been building toward. What is the machine that has been doing the sorting? It is not one villain, one law, or one president. And anyone selling that simple story is selling something. It is three forces, all switched on around the same time, all still running at full power today. Force number one, the great deletion of middle jobs. The old middle class stood on two massive pillars of employment: the factory floor and the office support desk, the assembly line and the typing pool. These were middle-skill jobs, and they paid middle wages to tens of millions of Americans without demanding a degree. But then two things arrived almost together: the shipping container and the computer chip. The container made it cheap to build things on the other side of the ocean. The chip made it cheap to automate the routine work that remained on this side of it. American manufacturing employment peaked at nearly 20 million workers in 1979. And then the long slide began. The filing clerks, the bank tellers, the phone operators, the machinists, whole job categories thinned out or vanished entirely. Here is the cruel geometry of it. Automation and offshoring did not attack the top of the job market, and they did not attack the bottom. The surgeon was safe, and so was the plumber. Because robots struggle with judgment, and they struggle with doorknobs. What got hollowed out was everything in between: the predictable, repeatable, middle-wage work. Economists literally call this job polarization, an economy growing at both ends while thinning in the center. Therefore, the ladder out of the working class did not disappear, but its middle rungs were quietly sawed off. Force number two, the education toll booth. As the middle jobs vanished, the economy redrew the map of who gets paid. In the new economy, a 4-year degree became the toll booth, standing between the bottom and the top. Workers with degrees increasingly got sorted into the rising lane, toward tech, finance, medicine, and management. Workers without degrees increasingly got sorted into the other lane, towards service work that pays less and promises less. But the toll itself kept climbing because college costs raced ahead of inflation for 40 consecutive years. Therefore, the very ticket required to escape the squeeze became one of the biggest sources of the squeeze. Millions of families now borrow crushing sums just to buy their kids a shot at the tier above them, and millions more watch the toll booth from the outside, doing essential work the country cannot function without for wages that cannot build a cushion. Force number three, the winner-take-most economy. Even inside the same profession, pay has been pulling apart like taffy. The top companies in every industry now capture a wildly outsized share of the profits. Working at the number 1 firm instead of the number 20 firm can mean double the paycheck for similar work. Superstar cities pulled away from ordinary towns. Superstar firms pulled away from ordinary firms. And superstar workers pulled away from everyone. Therefore, the economy stopped handing out average outcomes. An average is exactly what a middle class is made of. When rewards cluster at the top of every field, the center of every field empties out. Put those three forces together, and the sorting machine comes into focus. Middle jobs deleted, a rising toll booth deciding who climbs, and a prize structure that pays the top and shrugs at the middle. Nobody designed it as a single plan, but it runs like one. Now, why should anyone lose sleep over the shape of a chart? Because the middle class was never just an income range. It was America's shock absorber. A thick middle is what makes a society stable, the buffer that keeps the top and the bottom from becoming enemies. It is the biggest customer base for every business and the biggest taxpayer base for every school and road. When the middle thins out, the diamond becomes an hourglass, heavy on both ends and fragile in the center. An hourglass economy produces exactly what America has been feeling. Two groups staring across a widening gap, wondering what happened to the country they grew up in. The frustration on both ends of the political spectrum is, in a very real sense, the sound of the sorting machine running. History offers very few examples of societies that stayed calm after their middle hollowed out, and none of them are comforting. So what does any of this mean for one ordinary person watching this right now? It means understanding one uncomfortable truth and acting on it early. The machine sorts, and it sorts on skills the machine itself cannot copy. The work that survived every wave of this transformation shares one trait. It is hard to automate and hard to outsource. Judgment, hands-on skill, human trust, and the ability to keep learning after the diploma. These keep landing on the up escalator. That does not always mean a 4-year degree, because the electrician and the nurse got sorted upward right alongside the software engineer. It means refusing to build a life on routine work, because routine is exactly what the machine eats first. And it means treating the middle not as a destination anymore, but as a moving walkway that requires walking. Because here is the honest, unvarnished truth about where this is heading. The sorting machine is not slowing down, and artificial intelligence may be about to hand it more power than it has ever had. The middle class of 1971 assumed the middle would always be there, waiting, the way it was for their parents. 50 years and 25 million sorted Americans later, that assumption is the one thing that has been fully deleted. The middle of America is not dying quietly. It is being sorted, person by person, year by year, into a country with a very tall top and a very crowded bottom. And the most important financial question of this generation is no longer how to get into the middle class. It is which direction the machine sorts you when it finally reaches your name.